Welcome to this week's episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast. Today we're thrilled to have Dr. Amy Athey with us, a licensed psychologist and trailblazer in the field of sport and performance psychology, crisis intervention, and non-traditional mental health programs. She has delved into the essence of sustained high-level performance and developed the Elite REST program to combat sleep deprivation. A champion of the inclusive mindset, Dr. Athey is here to unpack the strategies and mental shifts crucial for long-term success, share sleep hacks for peak performance, and shed light on the importance of inclusivity in today's teams. So buckle up, we're about to crack open some truly transformative insights.
Well,
all right. Well, welcome to the show.
Yay.
Great to be here.
Dr. Amy Athey. Good to have you on. I hear some good things about you. It's very nice. I am going to just blow right out of the starting gate and ask you some questions that I am just anxious to hear, because we all work with athletes and we all work with first responders. And so your insight is going to be priceless today. Just understanding the performance psychology aspect of it. And so dealing with these, high achieving people and people from, different worlds, whether it be sports or special forces. And I would love to know how you tailor your approach to these completely different occupations and lives. And, is there like a universal lesson or like kind of an approach you take when you first engage in these individuals?
Yeah, I think first, regardless of the elite performer, it's helpful to first just listen and understand why they're doing what they're doing, why this is so meaningful for them, and something that they have pursued relentlessly for many, many years, right? And certainly working with professional athletes, professional operators, even business executives, understanding that motivation is critical. Because the reality is to take the hits that they take, to train for the hours that they do, that then their performance, in some domains may only be 10 seconds. I think understanding that motivational aspect is just so key. Beyond that, when I think about, and when I'm listening for how they approach the challenges ahead, I'm typically thinking about a couple of core components when we think about key aspects of mindset that are critical and executing at a high level, basically in those moments that matter. I'm thinking and listening for how do they regulate their emotional energy? And there's a lot of different frameworks out there. People use different tools or strategies to do that. But first is an awareness of what level or intensity of that arousal is necessary for them to perform at their optimal level. Sometimes that's contextual based. If an operator has a number of different performance demands, it may look different for a specific demand. For example, you might imagine hand-to-hand combat. That arousal level may look different than when they have to lower their heart rate to be an accurate rifleman. So I'm trying to best understand what is the demand and also what is like the best fit for them in regulating their emotional energy to perform at that optimal level. I'm always curious, where is someone's attention? What we know from elite performers, it's not just that they know how to focus, but they refocus. And so it's, our human attention spans or ability to concentrate, even in the course of this conversation, it's going to be normal that perhaps our mind wanders a little bit, like just in listening to me, it might trigger an internal thought that you have. Maybe it's kind of leading to another question you want to ask, right? But in order to stay centered in this present moment, elite performers have those abilities to be aware of their mind wandering and refocus on what matters most. So again, working with elite performers, I'm trying to best understand where is their concentration, what are they focusing on when, and is that really helping their performance, or are there circumstances or thoughts, mind wandering, etc., that may not be optimizing, and that might be a path or a point of discussion that we explore together and kind of work on some strategies for those concentration skills, if you will. And then lastly, I would say like a key element is confidence, and confidence is very temporal. It shifts. And there's different elements of confidence. A lot of that kind of starts more globally with just a core belief in ourself and then our esteem. But certainly it comes down to like the most specific of elements, which is, can I execute this task when I have to execute it, when it matters most? And a lot of things can impact that. And so I really listen for and better understand, how does an elite performer, what goes into their confidence? And when that shifts for them, what are they doing? What skills do they use to get it back to where it needs to be able to go and perform something incredible? So it's just a really quick breakdown, but certainly it does transcend performance domains, those elements of emotional regulation or composure, confidence, concentration, and then key aspects for me over the long haul. It's not just doing one great performance, but sustaining that over time is understanding people's motivations too.
So we love case studies, and I obviously don't mention any names or anything, but so the audience will sometimes relate to certain specific stories or examples. Do you have one, or a couple in particular that you care to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's people sometimes misunderstand about what I do is that I'm often trying to help people think less, not more. And so I mentioned those core components, but when it comes down to the moment of execution, actually what we know is ideally people are in these flow states and they're able to just let out that which they have programmed in, right? And it's an automaticity of those skills. And so it's actually the quieting of the mind that allows their bodies to just do it. And so one case, that comes to mind right out of the gate is actually helping an elite performer. He's an operator, have a preparation routine going into this performance demand that helps center himself. I mentioned that emotional regulation regulates the energy of where he needs to be, but actually gives his mind something to occupy itself with, because it does want to help us, but not distract and slow us down. Automated motor movements, there's no way we can think fast enough to execute them, right? So if you're a tennis player and you're wanting to talk yourself through this serve, what usually happens, right? It slows it down, something gets wonky, the mechanics get off, versus if you can kind of have a cue of a specific motor movement or element to that movement, gives the mind something to execute with. So this operator I was working with, actually, and talking with him, he was using cue words, which we know is a strategy, but he was actually just kind of misapplying them. And in the performance domain, he was trying to talk to himself and use these cues while trying to execute these tasks. And the reality was it's just slowing him down. And so what we worked with is more the preparation to that moment, using the cues more in that moment, and then trust as a performance skill entering into the performance execution, how he can kind of be better prepared to let go and execute. So that's one. Like I said, sometimes I'm helping to people to quiet the mind more so than think more about their performance.
What would be a cue? What would give us an example of a cue word or cue thought that you're referring to?
Yeah, so I'll transcend to sport for a minute. So basketball was my sport as a collegiate athlete. Take a close skill like free throw shooting, for example. Like my cue was elbow in, follow through, elbow in, follow through, and that was it. Like it didn't matter if it was 1 second left on the clock or we up by 40. It doesn't matter. Every time, deep breath, elbow in, follow through. And the more you can actually rehearse that and use visualization in preparation, you can reinforce also that motor movement. So it can be, cues are best if they're very simple, direct, action oriented. Instead of saying to myself, "I'll just relax. Actually, I'm going to deep breath, right? It's an action that we know then will trigger that really relaxation response. But just telling yourself relax doesn't really transcend to anything happening. So yeah.
No.
So let me ask you an example that I want to make sure that I understand this, because this is something that everybody could use immediately, and I had a Major League Baseball player tell me that he consulted with a sports psychologist and asked if he goes, "What are you focusing on?" And he goes, "Well, when the coach walks out onto the mound and tells me don't walk this guy, that's all he's focusing. That's the last words." So he goes, no. He goes, you strike them out.
Right.
Hit the strike zone. Hit the strike zone is what you want to focus on, instead of don't walk this. So it gave him a negative cue.
Yeah. So our brains don't process that negative piece. All he is encoding and processing is walk this guy. So yes, they need to be action oriented, what you are going to do, not what you're not going to do. So
beautiful.
Don't stress. Yeah, that's not going to help you out much. Yeah.
Is that the same kind of thing? Because I know we've had guests on before. We talk about words, and we're not really big on words like try and hope or I'm busy. Is that the same thing? Because like try and hope are words that give you an out. Is that the same thing you're kind of talking about?
I think a little bit in the element of what is direct and actionable, right? So if you're going to try what, right? And so, I come back to what is immediate and actionable, like in guiding behaviors, because that, if it's clear directive, that's what you can take action on, right? So try, what does that look like? Does it look like, I'm going to be fully present? Okay, well, what is that? Well, I'm going to, when I notice my mind wandering, I'm going to take a deep breath and say, what's important right now, right? What's important now, when? So that you just kind of have to drill down with some questioning of what does it look like? How could I execute that? Get to a very specific, actionable directive.
Do you find a lot of people don't know how to drill down? They just say these words and they're on the surface, and below the surface there's nothing there, and they're very strong on the outside, but when layered down they're lost. Do you find that
and I mean, I think in some elements of different performance crafts we somewhat reinforce it too, right? Like for example, in sport, you'll hear it in interviews all the time, well, we're working the process. Just stick with the process, right? And then I challenge people then to ask that athlete, what is that for you? What is the process for you? And that's when it kind of gets ill-defined or really just vague, frankly, right? What does it mean to stick with a process? What is your process? How do you approach this pursuit of excellence in your craft? And there are likely some core components to that, right? Like I mentioned motivation before. How do you respond to setbacks? What are some core components of how you approach this with your mindset, with your recovery, with your relationships with your coaches, your trainers, your medical providers, right? There's going to be some core constructs, but that's an example. And especially in sport. Oh, I'm working the process. Okay. I don't know what that means.
Do you find it difficult nowadays, where a lot of these athletes, they're playing games on their iPhone, they're gamers at home, they're it's high speed, high action, lots of information coming at them. And then, during their sport, they might be doing a real focused free throw, or a pitcher is slowing things down. Do you to make sure that next pitch is either going to be a strike and not a walk the guy? Do you notice that they have trouble? If you find out that they are big gamers, that there's a lot of distraction.
I don't know if I'm necessarily seeing like the direct correlative of like gamers with attention, and kind of that regulating of that pace and having some patience in their process instead of wanting it, right now. But there is some interesting research out there around just how societal changes have influenced our concentration and our abilities to perform. Johann Hari's book, Stolen Focus, is excellent. I think he does an excellent job of kind of capturing what many of our younger generation and the amount of information that we're all given now, the interruptions that we have in our day, and how that impacts, even just getting email notifications, right? That how can we could be in flow and jamming on a report, get an email notification. And he does an excellent job of demonstrating, like through the research, of showing how long it takes us to get back and really productive. And so I think not just athletes, but for all of us, we're seeing some shifts in our lifestyles, and that is impacting our concentration and refocusing abilities. And he does a nice job too of kind of capturing some considerations and maybe what we want to do. Technology is not going away, right? Like, so it's here. We're living this new world. How do we use it to aid us versus it kind of pulling us away and undermining kind of the lives we're wanting to lead?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You mentioned twice. You've already mentioned flow, and one of my favorite terms is flow state. And Stephen Kotler, I don't know if you know who he is. And I love his books, and I love how he talks about flow. I'm a skier, so I resonate with a lot of his stuff.
Yeah.
And he, athletes have that ability, and they're learning more and more how to get out of sympathetic and balance sympathetic, parasympathetic. They're learning how to get into these flow states, and to maintain it over time. How can you dig deeper in your thoughts on this flow state and how these mental shifts and strategies and habits are found to maintain long-term focus and concentration at that high level?
Yeah, I think the first thing I always enter in the conversation with is understanding how powerful flow states can be. And the reality is they don't happen most of the time, right? So we are fully present and engaged in this flow state. But I work a lot with athletes around how they can basically strategies or techniques they can use to hopefully increase the odds that they'll be able to let it happen, which is that flow state, and be fully present. And a big technique for that is mindfulness meditation. Like, the research is very clear of the power and the benefits that come from mindfulness meditation. And so when we talk about flow state, those are some of the skills that we might work on. With that being said, I also have been doing a lot more around clutch states, and this research is just more recent coming out. And if you can consider clutch being, you're going to make it happen. So there's 1 second on the clock. You haven't had your best game. You've been grinding, fighting through it, and you need to get across the line, right? And so what are those skills and those actions and focus points that can help make things happen, even if you aren't on your best day? The reality is the greatest performers of all time, yes, they were able to tap and perform in those flow states. But what made them also great is that when it wasn't happening, they found a way to make it happen. And so, yeah, Michael Jordan can have the 40-point games, or LeBron James can have the 40-point games. But what makes those athletes phenomenal is those days where it wasn't there, they are still contributing at a very high level. And so their overall consistency across their career is just phenomenal. So yes, I would go to mindfulness meditation and the benefits of that. I work very specifically with teaching athletes or high performers how they can quiet their mind through simple meditation exercises. There's tons of apps out there. And so really I start them small. Like, can you sit for 5 minutes and focus on your exhale? Can you, and some of them are guided imagery. They can use that. Can you build that up to 10 minutes to 20 minutes a day? and then each day commit to that new habit. And like I said, the research is pretty clear, the benefits of mindfulness meditation and improving concentration, flow states, emotional regulation, even creativity, cognitive flexibility, relational skills. So it's pretty powerful. And then the clutch, how do you make it happen? It kind of goes back to some of those cues I was mentioned, but very goal oriented. Like, what do I need to get the ball across to the end zone? And so it may be very, a dig deep kind of cue, but a very specific, I'm going to drive right here, kind of cueing. So those are the two that I often am working with high performers around.
So let me make sure. I mean, I'm going to totally date myself. I've been referred to as being prehistoric, but is flow state what we used to call the zone, getting in the zone by any chance?
Yeah, I think some people will refer to it as the zone. And it's really like you are completely absorbed. Like if you've ever, it's not just in sport, right? Like it could be, I recently was just doing some craft, like a scrapbook for my kids, right? And I was in the evening, 8:00, and the next thing I know, I look up and it's like, holy shit, it's 11:00. I need to go to bed, right? It's like, and people will talk about that, doing gardening or yard work and like joke about like, I look up and we forgot to fix lunch, So you are completely absorbed. It's a very non-judgmental space in sport. What you'll see when somebody is in flow is like, there's really not a good shot or a bad shot. It's just that was a shot and I miss it. I'm defense. Like I'm on defense. I'm getting a stop. Alternatively, in less than flow state, that's usually where you'll see I missed that shot and I'm back on defense and I'm kind of ruminating, beating myself up. I've got this negative self-talk or dialogue going on, right? I'm not fully present in this moment of stopping the ball. So yes, flow is usually like you're in the zone, kind of, I guess, mindset.
Hunter, yeah, Spencer, it's kind of like when you're knitting and you get really into that last stitch, when
stitch one, purl two. You mean when I'm in it? Yeah. Okay. Why do I know this? I don't know. Don't ask me. I'll give you a better example. I hate you. I'll give you a better example. I have a patient that's a cardiothoracic surgeon, and when he tells me about, I ask him, so what do you love about it? And he talks about the zone and says that everything, he goes, when he's in that surgical suite and things are moving at a fast pace and all that, he goes, it slows down for him, and the momentum builds intensity, and it is just that is like his favorite point in all of his history of surgery or medicine, is that I guess you would refer to that to as the flow state, where
it's just
nothing
very
else exists.
It's very effortless, right? And that it feels like very pleasurable, like you're just rolling, and it's pretty phenomenal. It's pretty awesome when you find yourself there.
So let me ask you this, and I think we just said trigger something. It's like you can go down. So I'm going to go back to my sport, skiing. You can go down a run, and it's very difficult, and then you can just all of a sudden you can go down the run 10 minutes later, and it feels like it's a beginning run. It just everything flows. It just is really simple and easy. If you're in your basketball example, if you're in that, what's some cue words you can go to get that person from that difficult state to where it flows?
Actually, if I was working with you, the first thing I would say is actually not cue words, but I would say, let's listen to some music or sing. Because it's the rhythm that can kind of help. It does give the mind something to occupy itself with. Like I said, mind's very active. It wants to help, right? But I would start with rhythm and especially in skiing. So, nowadays everybody's got their earbuds rolling around. There's some really interesting literature around, lyrical language. It's a different part of the brain. It's closer to the motor control centers of the brain. And so I often, like long distance runners, or even if you look at like softball pitchers, if you were to put like a beeping, if every time their arm passes their leg, so it goes back, 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 right? There's be a cadence to that rhythm, right? And so for skiing, if you're kind of working your way down, if you can kind of find a rhythm, you're probably going to be more likely to kind of experience that body just doing it. Versus a cue word of that goes back to the example I talked about with the operator trying to think his way through the performance task. We're trying to like let it out. And the cue words might be helpful if there's, say, like a mogul or a sharp turn, right? Like I want to like, I want to plant, or, I want to, aggressively shift. You might have a cue word for those critical junctures on the trail. But really for flow, I want rhythm, kind of. Yeah.
Rhythm.
So Terry, when Dr. Athey says to sing a song, I don't think she's referring to your favorite Mary Had a Little Lamb. So anyway,
it's got good rhythm.
Excellent rhythm. I'm sure you could TikTok that or like get that out there. That would like totally boost the virality of this show. Like,
yeah, totally. I think that's my new song going down the mountain.
You're marketing. We gotta get somebody else with a trail cam on you, because that's just gonna
totally.
send it.
Oh yeah, I totally send it. That is my new, and lambs are just on it, man. Thanks, Bess.
All right, so Humpty Dumpty had a big fall is not necessarily what you want to be singing. All right. Getting back to something way cooler. Amy, you said, I like this quote. What gets you here doesn't always keep you here. It's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Could you share a story where you've seen an individual or team falter because they didn't understand that concept?
Yeah, I mean, actually, some of the research is clear. Like you mentioned Major League Baseball. So they've looked at professional athletes, and those who are working with performance psychologists tend to have a longer career. And the reality is that at the tier 1 level, whether that's in military, sport, even I would argue in business, many people haven't had access to performance psychologists. And nonetheless, through their own development pursuits, reading, listen to podcasts, or trial and error, they have they may not have the same labels to those mental skills that I and other colleagues may give them, but nonetheless, they have kind of maybe some fundamentals that aided their trek up the mountain. And yet, once you're there, there's going to be different challenges, right? Like that's the whole point of this. Like we're constantly evolving, and the challenges look different. And anybody who's kind of rode up through the ranks and all of a sudden find themselves at the height of that leadership knows that it can also be very lonely. And so now what? So I work a lot with tier 1 performers who have phenomenal foundations of mental skills to execute. And now they're challenged by, okay, now how do I make a 20-year run at this? And I've got different life demands now. Like sometimes in the earlier part of our careers, depending on the performance domain, it looks a lot different. You're in college, you might have a social life you want, but you may not have 2 kids and a partner at home, or a parent who is sick, a house to maintain, right? So your balance. I kind of always laugh about the whole balance thing, but basically the demands that you're kind of juggling shift. And so for a whole host of reasons. What gets you there may not keep you there. And so I work with a lot around performance excellence and sustainment over time. And that could be motivation. It's a lot around recovery. It's a lot around like when you're highly skilled, you don't have these huge leaps and bounds. Like my 15-year-old daughter, she's a elite travel ball player. She's a pitcher, right? She'll have 2 mile, she just jumped up, went from throwing 57, 58. Now she can get to 60, 61. Well, you talk to a collegiate player, they're not having 2, 3, 4 mile an hour jumps in a course of a training season, right? So when you don't have those huge gains, what are you doing to fill your bucket and to sustain that over time? So, so just different challenges. And the beauty of it is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a ton of strengths that this person likely has it brings to the table of how they might be able to shift or adapt to the new challenge and the new landscape. I use the toolbox metaphor a ton. If your toolbox, everybody probably has a hammer, a Phillips head, flathead, right? They probably have a drill, right? But depending on this project ahead of me, I'm probably going to need some specialty tools. And so for each project, you may have to go buy a tool that you only use for that project. And the question is, well, how bad do you want that project to happen? Are you willing to make a shift and do something slightly different because this performance demand is needing that to happen? And you may still go back to your kind of cornerstone of what got you here, but you have to be willing to be flexible, adopt some new skills, and flex to them when needed.
So what gets you here doesn't always keep you here. Also, is what we've always heard is that the journey is sometimes more exciting than the actual accomplishment. And then what? And so you basically give people a new finish line to run towards. Is that?
Yeah, I do. Basically, I mean, like I said, the elite performers I've worked with, they don't want to just win one game. They want a career of winning games.
Right.
Right. And at the pro level, those are very long seasons. And when you're working professionally in your craft, you want to sustain that career. A lot of it is bouncing back from the adversities that are, whether it's at the micro level, mistake management, or just more macro, what are you doing for the recovery and resilience piece? Because we're all human. I mean, there's some phenomenal performers out there. At the end of the day, we're all human. So how are you taking care of that machine, if you will?
Do you probably deal with the same thing on injuries too, because athletes will get injured over and over and over, and they start mentally just crashing, going, I wasn't meant to do this, but they were meant to do it. So is that the same thing besides the mental dips, or what Spence, what's that thing when they call it in baseball when the yips or stuff like that? Yeah, where they get into that mental, but also the physical. If they keep getting hurt, and they, like for a bike race or a Tour de France, they crash over and over and over. Pretty soon they start losing their confidence.
Yeah, it is. And I've worked with athletes like had an ACL, come back, they're in 3 games or 3 practices and tear the other ACL, and that's it's crushing. I mean, I think there's a couple things that we could do in our kind of collective community to help with that. I mean, we all are optimistic, right? And we want to suggest that despite the adversity, you can come back and you can be this. I think sometimes though we do a disservice when you hear people say, oh, you're going to come back stronger than ever. Well, the reality is if you tear an ACL, we can get you back. But I think we also, and at a very high level, I mean, we've seen countless athletes, right, come back from an injury such as that and perform incredibly, win world championships. But I think we also have to be mindful of how our expectations kind of set us up for that success, or perhaps set us up to kind of have a bit of a battle. Because long-term rehab, such as an ACL injury or shoulder, or, they're grind, and they're a different kind of grind. They can be very isolating for athletes who are part of teams, and especially all of a sudden they don't see their teammates. They don't see their teammates for months, except if for those who may be coming in and out of the training room for, a hot bath or getting in the cool tub or maybe getting taped. They don't see them a lot. And that connectivity is so crucial in their healing. And certainly it can just be a rupturing of like their identity and how they contributed back to this organization. And so if you have back to back, it is incredibly challenging. And then all the other psychological aspects that roll into injury recovery, pain management, for example, and how what our understanding is that acute pain, but also the risk of how that also can be kind of more chronic pain management. So it's a whole spider web, if you will. I kind of lump it under that adversity category, and really double down on aspects around how are you setting realistic goals and targets for yourself, and kind of coming back to that. It's no different than, when we say we're launching you to college and we're so excited for you to get to the 4-year degree. Well, that can be really overwhelming. So what do? We break it up into semesters or quarters, right? Like, and so we just want you to get through this quarter, and let's work for this. And then let's go to the next marker, right? And how you're going to motivationally boost and celebrate those small wins along the way. So yeah, there's a whole host, that kind of conversation where it could go with that.
Before I'm super excited to talk about your elite rest program, but before we do that, could you mention or elaborate just quickly on a comment you started to make probably about 15 minutes ago regarding balance? Did I hear you say you had an opinion about balance?
Yeah, I'm not a big life balance kind of gal. I think in our ideal state, we could craft our lives where, we're making everyone happy. We're doing the things that fill us up, and it's all balanced, right? I've got work over here in this nice, neat bucket, and I've got my family over here in this nice, neat bucket, or me over here. And I kind of push back against that ideal a bit. My experience working with elite performers is they're in a very, very focused pursuit of their craft.
I like that.
And it's not that they don't have families. It's not that they don't have me time. But those who are looking to perform and do things that others have not, or sustain it in ways that, just very few people can do. I haven't experienced any of them that have this like balance. It's a very, very aggressively focused pursuit. I tend to fall back to this more notion of blending versus balance. I know the times in those blends when I need to dedicate and be fully present for my kids. And I am sure to carve that out. And my kids also haven't experienced me kind of just a carved out work hours, right, as much. So it's pretty fluid. The benefits of that is they've been in the industry, and so they love going to games. Even though mom's working, we can kind of still celebrate and blend those experiences for, fulfillment. But I do kind of fall back on blending, and my experience in my career is also learning that at any moment it is highly likely I will disappoint someone, that I can't be all people to everyone, right? And whether that's recognizing those moments, I need and prioritizing my time with my children and saying no to a coach. And I did this one time. I had to say no to a postseason travel. And fortunately he understood. He was disappointed, but he supported me. It was incredibly understanding and disappointed, right? That and the flip side of it, the next year I traveled with the team, and I know my kids were probably disappointed, right? So it is, as you pursue any craft, really, I consider it to be this blend and an awareness of what I need, and certainly of those who are most important to me, and kind of where that all lines up for you. You kind of focus there
glad.
when you need it. Yeah.
I'm so glad you elaborated on it, because that you hear that, oh, you need balance, but I get it. There's such a thing as laser beam focus, so you could spend less time but more intense, and then use that time for some other more important things. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's jump into the other end of the spectrum, that probably the most underrated aspect of performance and healing and all that, and that is rest. Talk to us about your elite rest program and what you feel about what goes on in society today.
Well, we know sleep is the number one performance enhancer, right? Whether it's in the classroom, whether it's on the field, it is incredibly powerful. Dr. Michael Granier at the University of Arizona and I partnered in 2016 and developed recovery enhancement and sleep training, which is a holistic approach to optimizing sleep for wellness and performance. And we were initially incredibly grateful that NCAA received some funding to do some research around that program. And since that time, I've iterated it through the years, adapted it to different high performers, whether that's in sport, military, or business. And we have had, just really proud of the impact that it's making. We found through core components of screening and making sure that people are getting the appropriate support, whether that is on more of the medical or clinical side for conditions such as sleep apnea or insomnia. For those who are doing okay, but just need some information maybe to troubleshoot challenges ahead because they're traveling 4 time zones and then back, and they have to give a presentation. And then there's sometimes this middle group that some sleep coaching can help. So we do screening. We have significant education materials. And really from our program evaluation, that the feedback was that was some of the most impactful components of our program, is that people understood more about their sleep and what to do to help optimize it. So we really took an approach of, despite real life constraints or demands, you're not going to change your practice schedule. Try telling a swim coach you're not doing 5:30 a.m. swim. Try telling the TV company that you're not going to do the game at that time, right? Like, there are these real life demands. And despite those constraints, the information and through our education really helps empower people to kind of take back control of some of their sleep and be able to make some shifts to help optimize that. We also work with people, monitoring devices, technology. They're everywhere now. There's some really solid ones in the marketplace. There's some scary ones in the marketplace. But we really focus around helping people who are interested in wearable devices and having that information, how they can use that, and then nudging to help them. There's a lot of data coming out now, how there are some risks associated with the daily nudging and the daily notifications, which I think is really important for people to know. I'm sure the wearable devices, and when they're looking at their traction and all that, may not want it. But the reality is that, you can sleep 4 hours, maybe 5 hours, not feel great, and you wake and feel okay, and you wake up and it tells you, oh, you had bad sleep, and then all of a sudden the floor falls out. Or you can kind of likewise sleep 8 hours, it tells you you didn't sleep well. So the messaging matters, I guess, is my point in this, is that
Okay.
tracking it is helpful. I look at patterns, I look at it over time. But also I am constantly trying to get subjective data as well from the individual about what do they think? Are they waking feeling rested? Because first of all, in any measurement device, there's going to be some error associated with it. And how can we use that data to kind of make sense? So I take a very holistic picture and try to be aware of where those notifications can actually start spinning people up and ruminating about their sleep. And that actually has more of a negative impact. So we do a lot with technology, monitoring, nudging. And then lastly, we offer sleep coaching for those who are looking to troubleshoot or optimize. So it's a holistic program. We consult with individuals and teams, organizations who are wanting to learn more. So, yeah.
Do you have any sleep suggestions or sleep hacks that you off the top can share?
Yeah, I guess a couple of go-tos that I always start with, like scheduling matters. If the more you can get on a regular schedule of bedtime and wake time, it's only going to help you. There's some phenomenal research coming out about even if typically I go to bed, I'm asleep by 10, but if I don't go to bed till 12 or 1 a.m., actually like the hormones that are released in that time, typically, I missed it for that night. It's not like I start getting it from like 12 to 1. So scheduling really matters. For circadian issues, that matters. Avoiding the light at the evening, getting bright light in the morning, ideally within 30 minutes of waking, and ideally direct sunlight. No, me getting this from my window doesn't count. The glass is going to limit that. So just being aware of the impact of routine and then light. You want light in the morning. And then I fall back to stimulus control a lot. I'm not a very cool mom. I'm not a proponent of screens in bedrooms. And protecting the bed for sleep is critical. Basically, it goes back to this fundamental behavioral principles. We want this stimulus to be a consistent stimulus for sleep. If you eat in bed, you text in bed, you watch Netflix in bed, you have that dreaded conversation with your partner that explodes in bed, then all of a sudden, this is not a stimulus for what, right? You've got all of these different things. So my kids have to plug in their phone in my room on the floor, turned over, and no phones in the bedroom at night. Just protecting that space for sleep. And for those who are travelers out there, that transcends even then if you go to a hotel bedroom, that bed could still be a protected stimulus for sleep. So stimulus control is huge. Light, understanding schedules is huge. And just being aware that if you're waking in the morning and not feeling rested and you're still getting 8 hours of sleep, there could be something else that's impacting your sleep. So insomnia is incredibly common in our country. Apnea, especially men over 30, incredibly common. And so if you're having trouble, I encourage you to talk to your medical provider because it has just vast health and performance impacts. So, yeah.
That's great. We realize that sleep does so much for cleaning out the brain, so to speak, because several years ago they did some research where they found out there's actually a lymphatic system that runs through the brain after a day of thought, a day of intense, volume of thinking. There's a byproduct to all that, and it's cleaned out at night when you sleep, so you're fresh in the morning. We are going to step into one of the more exciting realms of our program, and that is the rapid fire questions. I have 5 of them for you.
Okay.
You seem to be a quick thinker. These, we try to make them quick, but sometimes Dr. Terry gets hung up on. No, I do. I get hung up on your answer, and I start asking more stuff. So let's go with number 1.
I'm singing Merry Little Lambs.
Oh, he's still thinking about his social media campaign with the slope and great.
All right, Humpty Dumpty, you ready? Okay, so here we go. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Probably time travel.
Ooh, interesting. Okay, I was ready to dive in to ask you about that. All right, never mind. We'll go into question number 2. You recently went skydiving. Dr. Terry's taking his son skydiving in a few days.
Okay.
What was your single favorite thing about that experience?
Oh, gosh. It has been a really long time since I truly was uncomfortable. Probably I gave birth naturally to my 2 girls. My youngest is 15, so that was probably the last time I was truly that, uncomfortable. And my backstory to that is I had a fear of flying. I was average. I was age of onset at 25 in grad school and never stopped flying. So for me, the best thing about skydiving was all of these things I've been teaching other performers for 20 years. My plan was the moment my feet hit the floor that morning, I tapped every one of them. And for me, it was exhilarating because I was able to be uncomfortable and use these things that I've been teaching and helping others use. And it proved to be a phenomenal experience. So it was very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So she walks the talk, people. This is good.
Yeah.
Right? And she
awesome.
she parallels skydiving and giving birth. That's
Yeah.
even more fun.
I was like,
Right?
you know what? Like, I don't know if I'll skydive. I might skydive again. I don't know. But I've always said I was blessed because I had uneventful labors, and I am the outlier of probably women who would say if I didn't have to raise children or be pregnant again, that was an amazing experience. So I would totally do that.
I love hearing that. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Question number 3. What is one lesson you've taken from the court as an All-American athlete that has stayed with you forever?
For me, relationships are the core of everything. They're like my most cherished piece. I wouldn't be where I am today without the many, many people who have influenced my life and helped pick me up when I stumbled, and like all of us and our stories, the adversity that we face, and then also to turn around and pop the bottle of champagne. Then it was a championship, but in life, none of this matters without the people that are with us. So, yeah.
So true.
Oh, that's great.
Excellent.
Great.
If there was one book that everyone should read, what is that book?
Oh my gosh. Ooh. I don't know if I have one for you. Or I can turn around and tell you what's on my
On your well put together, background.
I know. I have to turn around and pull some. What? But just one. Oh.
What's the book you recommend to people more often?
I mentioned Stolen Focus. That lately I've been doing a lot around concentration. So I've been doing a lot with Stolen Focus. Range is behind me. Also, I when I'm talking to the parents in the youth sport community, David Epstein's book Range, I'm constantly like, you should probably read that. With the early specialization, the youth sport crisis that I don't think probably is getting enough attention still. We've gained headway with the collegiate sport, talking about the mental health crisis, but the reality is the 18-year-olds came from somewhere, right? And so odds are, many were struggling before. And I think it's on us as parents and professionals in the industry to kind of challenge the models that that are out there in the youth sport. So I like range a lot, speaking to those aspects. And then honestly, on the personal level, probably a lot, my two kind of go, my oldest namesake, Maya Angelou, and then Toni Morrison are probably my two on a more personal level. Yeah.
And number 5 and last, let's talk music. What is your go-to song that gets you pumped up?
Oh my goodness. This is a hot seat. Go-to song. Probably.
And don't say Mary Had a Little Lamb.
This is not Mary Had a Little Lamb. We're saving that for Terry. That's awesome. It is probably something in my playlist from 1990s, like hip hop or Dave Matthews. I'm a 90s college girl, so.
Oh yeah, love it.
Always something with it.
That's great.
I was waiting for, Spencer's a hip hop guy and a rap guy because he works with a lot of NFL and Major League. So that's what he grew up with. So I'll be sitting there about some, 70s rock, and he'll come up with some name I've never heard. And,
That's awesome.
It's awesome.
In the Miami Dolphins, that's all we would hear is, rap. And I started one day I walk in and I go, oh, that's Tupac. And they go, oh, Doc, it's Tupac. I go, all right, I'm leaving. I'll go back to the training room. Yeah.
I will admit, I downloaded one song from our earliest shows that you mentioned, Dr. Spence, and I'll be running and it'll just come on and I start laughing and it's like, what's that? Crying Like a Bitch.
Oh. That's the one you downloaded.
And it's hilarious, but it's like this pounding rock song, and I'll be ready about just quit and walk up the hill, and that song will always come on, and I think of Spencer yelling at me, and the song yelling at me, and I just get up and I keep going.
So is that what's going to come on after the Mary Had a Little Lamb? We're going to have pan out to you like yard sale in the middle of the run?
Totally. I'll be coming down all in the rhythm and then crying like a bitch for even whining about it the first time.
If this doesn't happen, I'm going to come back on this show and come on, where is it?
It's going to totally happen, right? And we're going to have to come on and go, but did you sleep afterwards? No, I didn't sleep afterwards because I didn't do it right.
Oh,
That's
was great,
man. We could go on forever, but we do have to wrap it up. But I am not going to wrap this show up without not only giving a plug, but having you talk about your book, Leading Beyond Crisis.
Yeah.
And can you just discuss the 5 pillars shortly and talk about this book and how it transformed? And I am going to put a plug into it in your description. And I think it's fantastic. So can you just elaborate on the principles you discuss in your book?
Yeah, I mentioned the power of relationships when you asked me about what I took away from collegiate athletics. And my mentor, Dr. George Everly, who's an international scholar and leader in the field of disaster psychology, resilience, leadership. We had the opportunity to connect during COVID when I hadn't spoken with George for many years as my career kind of took me across the country. And we reconnected as I was building out a peer support program for the students at the University of Arizona when I was chief wellness officer. And we got to talking and we talked about the power of leadership and having the opportunity for leaders to be certainly like growth agents and helping organizations transcend crisis and seeing the adversity as an opportunity for growth. And so we got together. APA was very excited to publish our book and wanting to share this. We also shared back some research from looking at presidential leaders, the research coming from the data of the C-SPAN presidential historian surveys, and from our data and analyzing that, as well as reviewing literature all the way back to the classics of leadership. 5 virtues of transformative resilient leadership really emerged. And those include having an optimistic vision, decisiveness, having effective communication. Like in this world of digital technology, if leaders aren't communicating, someone else is, and that may not be incredibly helpful. The power of supportive relationships and the cornerstone of integrity. And we were really excited to kind of put together this book, not only as a kind of a review of the core components and why they matter with the fundamentals from the literature as well as the neuroscience, but really we were beyond blessed to be able to have some phenomenal leaders contribute back and share back their journeys and their stories. And I'll plug Coach Mike Candrea, just phenomenal leader, and coach, and others were able to contribute back and share their stories, and then hopefully have some pragmatic and takeaways for leaders to be able to kind of immediately place into action, and hopefully be able to transcend their organizations through adversity to opportunity. So yeah, thank you for asking about it. It's great.
Oh, it's great.
That's fantastic.
I'm gonna get her to lecture to our community of sports chiropractors somehow. So yeah, I love everything you were talking about. Thank you.
Thanks.
It just resonates for me so deeply. So thank you.
Yeah, I would be glad. I do. I love this work too, and my passion has always been like leaving spaces healthier than which I entered. And so whether it's sports chiropractic or sport organizations, military, business, I just it's incredibly fulfilling and just a blessing to be able to be here and kick these ideas around. It's great.
Oh, it's awesome. And we love your energy and all that. You know, folks listening, there will be a part 2 with Dr. Amy, and we'll dive into some more stuff. And I'll have some new intro music set for the show as well. I'm already percolating, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if it's gonna be fully complete without the visual. So we might have to schedule for March.
We might have to do that
because we need the January, February snow. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we still have it in California. I'm actually going skiing in July.
You're kidding.
The ski resort is not closing. Nope, Mammoth is not closing. The last day is July 31st. So I might have to film something I'm going skiing at the end of July, snow skiing. So I'll have to maybe send you something.
Spencer, now you're on record. So you put it out there. Let's say it.
I could do that. All right. Well, we're going to say goodbye, and we thank you so much for your time, and we thank you so much for your energy and your knowledge, and we appreciate you. And you have a blessed day.
You too. Thank you both.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast. We hope you enjoyed, and make sure you follow our Instagram at Crackin Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.